Hey, welcome back to Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I'm your host, Vito Chirco, on the 14th edition of the podcast, alongside Doc from Doc and Jock, John Mackeron. John, what's going on today?
Vito, happy Tuesday, man. It's a great week for the podcast. We just got done doing a little Periscope action, and I was really happy with the response. I'm thinking that maybe we need to get you to do a weekly little segment there on Periscope, answer questions, and actually now I'm learning the option of saving the Periscope video automatically. Then we can YouTube it and keep it up forever.
Periscoping is fun, too, and you know what? It adds another dimension of what we can do with the Detroit Sports Podcast at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. And you know what? I'm available. I'm willing to, as I told you before, I'm flexible. I can do what you want, Doc. To satisfy your needs, your requirements, I am your man. I am the dog here. I am the dog whenever you need a dog.
That's awesome. And now, and the great part about our recent Periscope was I'm always fascinated that we have fans overseas. Not only do we have reach here in the Metro Detroit area, but I'm still fascinated 2.5 years into the project that we get people who say, hey, I'm a fan. We listen overseas in England, and this week the Lions are overseas. And so it always makes it fun because we're getting the flavor of what's going on over there overseas, and especially with baseball, such a worldwide game. We're getting questions, on our Periscope and on our podcast network tweets, on our Twitter page from all over the world. And it's so fun. And I know we were joking around calling it Tea Time with Vito, but you know what? A simple name. We can just call it Tuesdays with Vito.
Or the water cooler, or water cooler talk with Vito, whatever people want us really to call it, whatever you want to call it, Doc. I'm willing to call it whatever you really want and the fans want us to call it.
I think we can set this up. Tuesdays with Vito, a Periscope video that we save and upload, and we can also,
use it on YouTube, you said, right, as well.
Yeah, because
that's a great option.
I just realized there's an option to save it to the phone, and I think we can do it. A Periscope video every single week, maybe 30, 45 minutes of you just bantering with myself and the fans that want to chime in.
Lively banter and tea talk. You know what? As you were saying before, we're getting cultured with these fans from all over the place, from who knows where. Now, where was that fan from the Periscope earlier? International fan. And as the Lions are getting cultured and how we want them to stay over there, our fans are over there supporting us. And that's great. And maybe supporting the Lions. I don't know if they're supporting the Lions, but at least they're supporting us. Lions are a different story, and as we said in the Periscope, they should stay over there in London and never come back. They should have their visas taken away to get back to the States. They should have all that taken away. Their passports, all that access taken away, so they have to permanently stay in London. And I think a lot of fans would love that right now, Doc.
Yeah, his name is Garth Westland. He's been a fan. He's been a fan for years, and he asked us to do a shout out for his daughter Annabelle, and we'll do it again here on the podcast. We did a shout out for his daughter, 3 years old, is a fan of.
That's cute. She's a fan. She's listening in.
She listens, and she's a fan. And he sent us a tweet here. I'm going to read it. It's kind of funny. I love having these fans. It's great to do this kind of project. He said, great scope, guys. Love Vito. I promise we'll lock the effing Lions inside Wembley for you.
Lock them in there, please. Leave them there, Garth, all right? And not Garth Brooks.
Garth Westland.
Westland. Very good. And I hope he's enjoying the Lions when they're there this Sunday. I don't know if anybody else will over here in Motown, but he can do that, and great to have that support, and the support of little kids. We have kids, middle-agers, we have older-age people, so I think we have everybody. We are very diverse in our fan base, aren't we, here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, and we're getting culture by the day with these fans. They're adding insight, they're asking us questions, and giving us new ideas, like to do this segment, this video segment that we can upload then on YouTube, and maybe make it into a water cooler type of thing with you and I, where we just banter, have lively banter for half an hour, hijinks and hilarity and all that good stuff mixed in through a half an hour segment on a weekly basis, along with this great podcast. And this podcast, as everybody should know by now, is Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. And we're going to culture you guys today maybe a little bit and give you some insight about the World Series and about our Detroit Tigers. And first and foremost, starting off with the Tigers before we get to our guest, Dominic Chirco, former co-host of the show, now at UDM studying poli-sci, political science, being really busy with that, with all his classes and credits. But he will give us some time today for about 10-15 minutes to join us to discuss maybe the Tigers as well. He doesn't love the Tigers, loves the White Sox, but we'll discuss the Tigers and the World Series. A huge emphasis on the World Series and who's playing in that Fall Classic this year. It is the Royals and the New York Mets. Two kind of Cinderella teams to a certain degree. Not the Royals, but teams that have not won a lot, have not achieved a lot in recent memory. Royals Before last year, we were last in the World Series in 85. Mets last time in 2000, but last time they won was 86. Last time the Royals won was in 85. So we'll have a team that hasn't won in, that'll be, 3 decades? 3 decades long. These two teams both have not won a World Series. That's been a long time since they last won. So one of them will get over that hump, will finally win one for the first time in 3 decades, Doc. How about that fact right there, that these two teams haven't won in that long of a time span?
It's great for the fan bases. I mean, you have Kansas City, who just tasted the sting of defeat last year in Game 7 when Bumgarner was miraculous. He came in and shut him down. When you have, the tying run 90 feet away and you're that close, and Bumgarner came in on short rest, and he did some damage to them, and he really cemented himself as being a big game pitcher, and he was able to shut down KC at home. The sting of and the Tigers know this, having had the Giants dance and celebrate at Comerica Park in a devastating fashion back in 2012. When an opposing team comes into your house and dances and celebrates and sips that champagne, that stings, man. So I think KC is going to have a strong edge and a burn to really try and avenge that loss last year.
And now let's look at the Tigers here and their targets before we dive deep into that discussion regarding the World Series and preview it with my brother Dominic Chirco. Let's do some Tigers news and notes and look at some of their pitching targets as we have ad nauseum throughout each edition, it seems like, of the podcast leading up to this episode, the 14th episode. And this is for you, Garth Westland, and all of our fans at DetroitSportsNation.com and through the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. And Doc, here we go. One of the first Tigers pitching targets that I discussed a long time ago was Jeff Samardzija. Let's dive into him again here and look at whether or not he's a good lower-end free agent target for the Tigers this offseason. Based on his stats, a 4+ ERA, not quite. But I think he will be because you can get him at that cheaper price tag. Doc, what is your opinion if the Tigers did go down that cheap route, adding Jeff Samardzija via free agency?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think that you've seen him now in the division as we face the White Sox 19 times every single year. He's a guy, though, that kind of starting to remind me a little bit now of Anibal Sanchez in that he's got good stuff, but the key part that is concerning to a lot of fans and to clubs around Major League Baseball is he consistent? He's a guy that needs to be able to put together consistent seasons and be able to be the guy that can be reliable. Too many times last season, there were starts when he didn't make, consistent pitches and had some trouble getting out of the first 3-4 innings. So, the White Sox counted on him to do some damage, but, if he is more consistent, if he can find the consistency and the ability to get guys out with a relatively high frequency, then he'll be a good addition. But we need guys now with the Tigers to rebuild. We need to rebuild that starting rotation, and I'm just not sure a guy like Samardzija is going to be that guy to be a 4 or 5 guy here.
He's not that first guy that you target if you want to really upgrade that rotation, rebuild it, as you said, really from the ground up, as the back end of the rotation starters and the middle of the rotation arms were not quality arms this year for the Tigers as a collective whole. Verlander picked it up in the second half. He was great. Kind of a dominant ace, had a no-hitter almost there with the Tigers, in the second half at one point. So he looked good, looked like JV of old. So that's good. He's bringing his varsity stuff, once again, as Rod Allen would say. So I like that, and I like that momentum that he's built up for himself going into 2016 to once again then be the ace of the Tigers pitching staff. But Samardzija, adding him, I would not like him at a high price tag. He wouldn't be a good middle-of-the-rotation guy or a very reliable one. But as a 4th starter, remember his fielding independent pitching was 4.3 or something last year. Yeah. Better than his overall ERA, but that tells you he's a 4th or 5th starter, Doc, too, at the same time.
Yeah, now I pulled up his stats from the Detroit News. They did an article regarding some top targets that the Tigers are likely to go after. Look at this. His fastball dropped from 95, 96 to 93 to 94 last year. And look what happened as a result. Gave up 228 hits, 29 home runs.
Way too many home runs, yeah.
In the American League. Yeah. And I was just reading a little bit before we started about the preview for the Mets-Royals series, and both teams have a plenty of arms that are throwing 95 to 96 miles an hour. And so I'm not interested in aging arms, Vito. I'm more
willing. Not that old yet, remember.
31, but when your fastball dips, unless you're doing some funky science medicine here, you're not going to regain that fastball and get it back up to 95, 96. So I would be more inclined to roll with younger guys like Daniel Norris or a Boyd and see what they can do, opposed to a guy in his 30s. I know that you're looking at cost effectiveness, but I think with Samardzija, as we talk about this, I'm going to say pass.
Just pass on him.
Pass.
Is that a hard pass then, too?
Easy pass.
Yeah, easy pass for you. Very good. And you know what? You look at his ERA too last year. As I was saying, it was high, very high. He allowed 228 hits. And you said the 29 long balls. That's a very scary factor to take into account. When Anibal Sanchez, who was bad last year too and hurt, he was hurt, though, and allowed 29 home runs. Samardzija did it relatively healthy from all accounts. So for me, that's a scary sign and a reason why you might want to stay off of him and move in a different direction. But I'm still not going to say that I'm going to pass on Jeff Samardzija if you can get him at the right price tag. But moving on to now some higher-end free agent pitching targets for the top of the rotation. And I'm speaking of specifically Johnny Cueto and Zach Greinke. I love Greinke a lot more than Cueto because of Greinke's recent success in the playoffs with the Dodgers. Cueto, not as much recent postseason success, and on the road, he's been miserable. That's why the Royals are starting him in Game 2 to avoid him starting on the road there in Citi Field against some Metropolitans. So a good decision there by Ned Yost, and a reason why I might not want to go after Johnny Cueto for big money in the offseason, even though he's achieved a lot in his past with the Reds as the ace of that pitching staff. And that's why I prefer Greinke as an ace over Johnny Cueto. I think as an ace-caliber frontline arm, you want to have Zach Greinke leading your rotation over Johnny Cueto. That's my opinion. That's why I would invest a lot of money into Greinke before I invest a lot of money into Cueto. But with that being said, Doc, you're on the line now here. You're on the hot seat. Who do you prefer, Greinke or Cueto? You know what my opinion already is.
No, I get. I'm fascinated to see what Johnny Cueto is going to do now after this year and after the World Series. But you're absolutely right. Zach Greinke is a guy that put together some great streaks last year and is a guy that can be, someone that could be a great addition for the Tigers. But I just don't see them going out for that big time arm. I really think that if they're going to go and spend big time money, they need to kind of allocate those resources and fix that bullpen. And I asked Mario Pemba his honest opinion regarding would you allocate more funds for the starting pitching or the bullpen, and he told me his honest opinion was he likes to have those arms and get those starting pitchers done and secured so that you can get 6-7 innings out of them and maybe count on some guys in the bullpen, because his opinion was guys in the bullpen tend to be finicky and have up and down years. And it's really tough to really rebuild a bullpen. So he really wants to allocate it towards starting pitching. So some guys out there in the lower tier free agents that can help the Tigers are Jordan Zimmermann. And a guy like that, I know is expensive. He's in the high target range too, but he's durable. The last 4 years, he's made at least 30 starts consistently. So that's a guy that you can say, okay, if you add him, that might be the only guy you really need. You add a Zimmermann, and then you can plug in a starting five for the Tigers of Verlander, maybe a healthy returning Sanchez, Daniel Norris, Zimmermann, and one guy that you've had in your minor league, whether it be maybe Fulmer, Boyd.
If Fulmer's ready, that's my question mark for the Tigers now going into next year. Is he going to be ready to make that big leap to the majors after only pitching in Double-A? And he's never pitched an inning, not even a single inning in Triple-A yet, with either the Mets or the Tigers. That's a concern for me, and then his injury past too. So I don't think he'll be on the opening day roster as a fifth-day starter, even though he's projected a one-day be in the Tigers' rotation and is good enough maybe right now to be that fifth or fourth starter for the Tigers. I don't think he has enough reps at the AAA level because he has no reps at all at the AAA level. And that's why I think the Tigers will hold him back for at least a half a season before they call him up to the majors. And that's why they have to add, though, somebody else, a veteran presence for the back end, who maybe is even cheaper than Samardzija. Maybe like a Doug Fister even. But I don't know if he wants to come back here. I don't know if the Tigers want him back here. He's declining. He's older. I don't know if I love the idea of bringing back Fister at this point after he was demoted to the bullpen last year. So if they go after any national starting pitcher, I would think it would be Jordan Zimmermann, but I think he'll be too pricey as well. Although you said, he's made these 30 starts in, 4 straight years of making 30 starts at least for the Nats. But for me, I'd rather have a guy like Greinke then, who's made 28 or more starts in the last 4 years, who had a 1.66 ERA this season, the greatest ERA this season.
So you're saying that
in baseball. So I'm going to say I like Greinke. I would rather pay Greinke all that money than Jordan Zimmermann anything comparable to that amount of money.
It's, when the season ended, I would have said that, Zach Greinke is way outside the price range. But Al Avila has come out and said that Mike Ilitch has said, listen, go out there and get me guys that can help us win. That the checkbooks aren't really exactly closed all the way. So with that being said, maybe Zach Greinke is the feature free agent that you get. And if you get that, and you make him the number one, Verlander 2, going on down the line, that's a solid 5 right away that can help get back to the playoffs. So
to win and beat the Royals, I think, but you can't have a dirty Sanchez again. You need the Sanchez to reemerge, okay, for the Tigers as a third starter.
No, Vito, you did not.
I just went there. Yeah, that's the pun that I just used to describe Anibal Sanchez.
Dirty Sanchez. That's
no
good.
Dirty Sanchez, okay?
That earned a tweet. All right.
Thank you. You got to use that. So I'm fine with him, but he has to reemerge and be a lot healthier. I'm concerned about that with him as well. His health, that's a big factor, a big red flag that the Tigers have to be largely concerned about regarding Sanchez. And then there's Norris. He has to be, healthy fully now. He was hurt last year, then has had the thyroid cancer, dealing with that, battling that. If he beats it, which he should, it's recoverable from, it's treatable, as we talked about on last week's podcast, then he's a really good, high-quality fourth starter, or even a third starter, if he really takes another step forward next year with the Tigers. So if that happens, then Sanchez can slide into that fourth spot, and then it kind of eases the worry that the Tigers might have about Sanchez being healthy for a full season and being at all better than last year, which he has to be even as that fourth starter for the Tigers in 2016, if they want to truly have a legit shot at dethroning the Royals as the American League Central Division champs.
Man, Vito, what is your take? Do you think that the Tigers are going to be guys that can get back to the playoffs? And a lot of talk around town is, okay, is the window closed? Are they a team that should now be looked at as rebuilding? Or can you really look at and say, you know what, Al Avila, with the experience working under Dave Dombrowski, can be a guy that can go out, scan the landscape, and find guys to help retool? Because when you look at it from the outside and you look at it, after the season ended, the Tigers do have young talent. But right now, the tough part is that, in 2012, 2013, we were expected to win the World Series based on the fact that we had solid, proven guys. Right now, the expectations kind of changed with a lot of potential. Will Iglesias come around again? Will James McCann emerge as a leader? Can J.D. Martinez carry things forward? You have a nice, solid group of veterans with young guys, but there's a little bit more risk because you have more young guys in this ball club. And it's going to be interesting to see next year how it shakes out with young guys.
You need that rotation upgraded no matter what if you want to truly contend. And I don't believe they're rebuilding. There's none of that here in Motown. They're rebooting, remember, retooling for next year to contend and to dethrone the Royals atop the American League Central. They can do that if they make the right moves and add an arm like Greinke for the top of that rotation. He'd be the true ace. Verlander would be the number 2 in that duo, in that combination of Verlander and Greinke. It would be Greinke number 1 after what he did this year and what he has done since joining the Dodgers in 2013. 2.63 ERA in 2013. In 2014, 2.71. Then last year, a great, astronomically great and low ERA, below 2 of 1.66. And all those Ks. I mean, he can do it all. 200 Ks in each of the last 2 seasons. And the ERA plus, which is a measure for how great a starting pitcher truly was at 2.25. That's how much it was higher than the league average for ERA in 2015. That's how good Greinke was. Then the whip below 1. He's the guy you have to add if you're opening up the checkbook big time, and Mr. Illich should as the owner of the Tigers. If Mr. I truly does that, they got to sign Greinke. They got to pay him whatever he wants. That's not extremely north of $200 million. You might go above $200 million. You might top it, but you're not going much above that. And if you want to also sign another starting arm for the back end of the rotation, such as a Jeff Samardzija or a Doug Fister on the cheaper end.
Man, there's so many options out there. I'm fascinated. I'm kind of fascinated. I wish we could have a chat with Al Avila to kind of get a sense of what he's looking for. Does he like that power arm? Because, Dave Dombrowski, once, he got in here and we knew what he liked. Guys like Kyle Farnsworth, guys like Verlander. He went after guys with big arms.
Yep,
he liked
always
that.
fire-throwing guys now as Avila. You're right. We don't know about his mindset regarding that.
Yeah, does he like a guy like Daniel Norris who's a little bit more crafty? Guys out there have had long careers who have maybe dipped. Does he go after a guy who's had a lot of innings out there, who maybe in his early 30s but's pitched a lot? But if you really just look, the model's out there. What KC has done and what the Mets have done. The Mets with Harvey and their vast array of young arms.
Who throw hard.
They throw hard.
Syndergaard, DeGrom, they all throw 95 or above. That's a telling sign, right?
And right now, though, the Tiger starters with Sanchez, getting up there in age, and Verlander, and, Daniel Norris is up there a little bit, but he was dipping around 93 to 95. They're not flamethrowers as much as they used to be.
No, and you know what? No matter if you're a hard-throwing guy or not, the ERA was so bad, was in the lower half of the majors for 2015. The WAR produced by the pitching staff, according to Fangraphs Baseball, was 4th worst, tied for 4th worst in the bigs. Only 3 teams had worse WARs produced by their pitching staffs as a whole in 2015. That's a telling sign, too, that the Tigers have to upgrade it, their rotation and pitching staff as a whole, immensely this offseason if they want to truly contend for the American League Central Division title in 2016. And the Royals barely have an edge there. They do because of that bullpen, but they also have a hard-throwing youngster in Ventura who has to be key and step up big time in the World Series, especially if Cueto struggles at all. And they're probably going to lose Cueto, remember. So that's a big loss for them in their rotation WAR and staff ERA and just capability overall-wise going into 2016 and going forward. So with that big of a loss that they're losing from the top of the rotation, Ventura has to step up big time next year to maybe even hold off a team like the Tigers or the Indians, who have that nice, deep, and young rotation right now, talking about Cleveland, 1 through 5, that is, too. So it should be a competitive, highly competitive division between even maybe the White Sox, too, and then the Indians, Royals, and Tigers in 2016. But with that, let's take a quick time out here and then get to my brother, Dominic Chirco, who will be joining us for the first time in a very long time on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company.
Doc here for FanaticU.com, Detroit Sports official outfitter and the official outfitter of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Visit FanaticU.com and get great gear for all Detroit sports teams. Michigan, Michigan State, the Tigers, Lions, the Pistons are about to open up, Red Wings. All you got to do is visit FanaticU.com and all your sports gear is taken care of. If you shop online, if you find something that you really like, if you find a clearance item, at checkout, use the promo code DSP. And when you use that promo code, Vito, you will save 15% off your entire order. Everything. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. They have a great selection of items that are pink, hats, t-shirts, ladies attire. Visit FanaticU.com. They have the widest selection of gear to represent all Detroit sports teams. FanaticU.com, promo code DSP. And now back to Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company.
And now joining me on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company is my brother, my former co-host and partner in crime, Dominic Chirco. Dom, what's going on today?
Not so much. Glad to be back on the show.
Welcome back into the fray. It's been a long time, and too long of a time, Dom. Without my brother, my lovely brother, Dom Chirco, he is here now with me. He's actually at UDM right now recording this with us. Dominic, how is the University of Detroit Mercy today?
So far, so good today. I'm in between breaks here with class and get a little reprieve and talk about some baseball.
So you're ready for some Tigers talk then, I would imagine, right? Because you know we have to mix in the Tigers talk here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Co. First and foremost, Dom, for you, would Jeff Samardzija now be a good lower-end free agent target for the Tigers this offseason?
I think so. I think, the issues with him this year, we've seen Tigers being in the AL Central playing against the White Sox. We saw that batting average against was the highest in the American League. But in the starts he faced the Tigers, he was a world beater, and he looked like his former self with the Cubs. And the Tigers, he's not going to be that expensive. And if he stays in the Midwest, we mentioned before, you and I talking about him being, an Indiana guy and grew up a White Sox fan, played for the Cubs. I could really see it happening for the Tigers. I think his value is declining as we speak, and we could definitely see change of teams and the Tigers being one of those teams that looking after him as a front runner.
If the Tigers really get aggressive, though, and want to open up that checkbook of owner Mike Ilitch, what do you think about adding then Johnny Cueto or even Zach Greinke via free agency this offseason?
Well, I think every GM would love to sign Zach Greinke, and I don't think he'll be in their fiscal plan because he'll be way too expensive for them. But Cueto's a guy like Samardzija whose value has decreased in this postseason. His low ERA has been deplorable. I mean, the Royals probably won't re-sign him just because there aren't a lot of good frontline starting pitchers. And I think the Tigers, again, were more likely to go after a guy like Cueto than Greinke. Greinke is the prize commodity for all the pitchers.
Who can afford him then this offseason? Because he's going to take a big contract to sign. And we both know that. So which team is most likely, in your opinion, right now to sign Greinke this offseason?
Well, I think there are a few teams. Obviously, the big market. We mentioned there before. We hear about Zach Greinke, his anxiety problems, and how he wasn't going to be able to adjust to the big market. But in L.A., we saw how good he did under pressure. He did well in the playoffs. He was outdueled by the Mets. He gave up less than 10 home runs during the season. He's a very good pitcher. I think if he stays on the West Coast, last year the Giants missed out on a big fish, John Lester, who they really wanted. and they missed out this. They won't miss out again. I think they're looking for a pitcher. They want to get back to the World Series again. Every 2 years, it seems like they're always in the thick of the playoff race. And I think a team like the Giants, surprisingly, will be cohort in the Greeky sweepstakes.
So, Dom, reverting our attention now to the Tigers, could we see both Samardzija and Cueto at the top of the Tigers' rotation in 2016?
I would have to lean towards no. I do think the Tigers should, first of all, I think they should look at guys that had better years first and foremost. A guy like Ian Kennedy, he struggled this year a little bit, but in 2014 he was good in the National League. He's more of a strikeout type, and he got swings and misses last year. Former first-round pick. He's in the same predicament as Samardzija, but I don't see that. I don't see where the money could. I could see where the money could fit in, but it'd be really tough for the Tigers to land both of those guys. So there's going to be a ton of teams willing to give off moderate contracts without overpaying for these guys. So these guys are going to pick where they want to go. It's not going to be, and whoever gives you the most money at some point will end up winning. So it'll come down to maybe the years, the length of the contract, and so what.
So we talked about some good pitchers just now, Dom. Let's talk about a former good hitter who just retired, who could have been a free agent, and that is Mr. Torii Hunter. The former Spider-Man, right? Used to be known as that, great center fielder, then became a right fielder with the Halos and with the Tigers, and then last year there with the Twinkies once again to end his career in Minnesota. And with all that being said, Dom, how should this man, formerly known as Spider-Man, who played in 10 seasons of 98 or more games in the Minnesota Twins and won 9 straight Gold Gloves from 2001 to 2009, be remembered?
You got to remember him. He's a very charismatic, high character guy, phenomenal work ethic, a good role model for kids, and even his younger counterparts or his younger teammates over the year as a veteran, as he's gotten older. He really helped the team gel. They would have, after the games, we'd hear about the Twins having these dance parties after, getting the team together. He built, he honestly would be a good manager. Team camaraderie was up with him. The Twins probably overachieved because of him to a certain degree. And you'll remember him as one of the best defensive center fielders to go down in history.
One of the best, won 9 straight Gold Gloves, and also, he failed to record a negative WAR over a full season until this past season, Dom, his final one in the bigs. And then at retirement, right now, he ranks 6th on the Twins' all-time home run list with 214 long balls in his career. Spent, as we said, mostly with the Twinkies there in Minnesota. And he would be a great manager. Would he be a better one than Brad Ausmus right now for the Tigers, Dom? Now, that's kind of a sarcastic question, but it begs the question. Maybe he would be with his ability that he's had in his past as a player to really build up the chemistry of a clubhouse. And we saw it with the Tigers, too, when he was there in Detroit.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I think Ausmus is more mundane, and he's more of the analytical guy. He doesn't understand, how to, gel a team together at some point, but that's the thing with managers, the guy that's played before and has had experience, with even dealing with, the management, upper management, and the teams that have looked after him. When the Angels signed him, he didn't really like it, not going back to Minnesota. And I think he understands how a team runs, and everything is fleeting, so it doesn't last. And even you can't really trust anyone in this business. And Troy Tulowitzki, a guy that came out and said so, makes this even more clear that, a team that you're with and, you know how to deal with adversity and so forth.
So, Don, what's more of a lasting moment now for Torii Hunter, the player? Is it Hunter robbing Barry Bonds of a home run in the 0-2 All-Star game, or his failed attempt at robbing Big Papi, David Ortiz, of a Grand Slam home run in Game 2 of the 2013 ALCS at Fenway Park? I think
Tigers fans will have that image of Torii Hunter filing over the Fenway fence forever, not in a good way. But I think mostly, though, you're going to remember Torii Hunter for that catch he had in the All-Star game, an array of home run robbing catches that this guy built together, a whole highlight tape you could compose of this wizardry in the outfield.
He was a wizard, indeed, there in center, and then in right with the Halos, Tigers, and Twins towards the back end of his career. And we talked about how he might be a good manager one day, maybe even sooner than later, which would make him a first-year manager and a guy without any prior managerial or coaching experience if he was to be hired next year or something like that, as we presume he'll take a year off at this point. So with that being said, he would be maybe a good first-year manager, as some other guys have been and other guys have not been in retrospect. And that brings up this good topic now. It's about the Mariners hiring this first-year manager without any prior coaching or managerial experience in Scott Servais, formerly the assistant GM of the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, where the current GM of the Seattle Mariners was. So it begs the question, is this a troubling trend, as Ken Rosenthal said from FoxSports.com in a recent article that he wrote about these guys being hired without any prior coaching or managerial experience? Is it as troubling as he labeled in his article, Dom?
I think it depends on the state of an organization. I think a team like the Mariners, it's more justified because they've gone with the traditional managers in the past, like Eric Wedge, Lloyd McClendon, who's had prior experience with the Pirates and Tigers. I think a team like that, it makes sense. But he has a point. We're just judging guys based on their analytical minds and how can they make that a good thing with splitting analytics and just old beliefs and different ways of getting the job done without using your head. And I think it works intuitively at sometimes.
Is this the right move? I mean, what move would you have made if you were the new GM here of the Seattle Mariners? Would you have hired a more experienced manager, Dom, in this circumstance, such as a Bud Black or maybe even a Timothy Bogart, who was there with the Rangers and then even was with the Halos at one point, and that's how Dipoto knew him, and that's why people thought maybe they would go in that direction and hire Bogart to be the new manager of the Seattle Mariners?
Here's the thing that I say no. I think they work together in Anaheim with the Angels, and I think they're more untested rather than having the experience, because they've dealt with those personnel issues before with Scioscia. They had like a little triumvirate, of not getting along, but they worked together. And I think, they kind of, Scioscia, in that respect, they saw a guy that wasn't going to conform to new ways as easily as those guys like Servais. Scott Servais, he played catcher. He's dealt with pitchers that, he dealt with playing with the Mariners. He dealt with the Aces or, the Randy Johnsons of the world. And he sees that, not every pitcher, not every player is the same, to a certain extent. And he has that, he makes for a good captain, so to say, a guy that you want to, have your team lead. So he doesn't have the experience as a manager, but he has an experience as, being a, critical part of the front office decisions.
And you know what? He was a player too, for all those years, and that's where that comes into play, as you were talking about, Dom. How much do those former players add then as manager, because they played for so long, even without that prior coaching or managerial experience? And like you said, they're going to be on the same page as well in the front office, Dom. Him and Dipoto. And that was an added factor, obviously, for why Dipoto hired him, and it should help out that relationship that they've had in the past, too, now working together here in Seattle.
Yeah, absolutely. They stepped away. They hired Servais. They felt that, the Mariners were under, the Mariners had to do something here. And, their ways of, they're more traditional, managers, guys that had experience before. Seattle's a team that's going to have to use more analytics because it's hard to hit home runs in that ballpark. They're going to have guys that can, they need run producers, table setters, guys that can get on base. They're the team in the American League that they have the longest drought for, reaching the postseason now. And it's become sort of a crisis, and they've had to act on it, and I think it'll be a good hire.
Dipoto using analytics, but I think I would have liked Bud Black, who also has proven to use analytics in the past. He was on that Just a Bit Outside broadcast last year on Fox Sports 1. Remember, he was in the studio for that broadcast, gave some valuable insight. Looks like he would have been a good managerial fit here as well for the Seattle Mariners, replacing Lloyd McClendon.
Another thing, yeah, exactly. I'm not saying, for the Mariners, it was a little different circumstance. They felt that they had to, maybe go change their ways, go to a first-year manager. I know everyone's doing it now, but for them, they dealt with the experience-filled managers in the past. It hasn't worked. This doesn't work for every franchise either, though. A team that's had first-year managers, you'll probably start seeing a trend where guys like Bud Black are going to be rehired as another manager somewhere else where they had a first-year manager, a team had a first-year manager where it didn't work.
And you know what? This first-year manager might be scrutinized pretty heavily as a first-year manager there in Seattle. Another guy who has been in the past is Ned Yost there in KC. And his team is in the World Series once again. 2 years in a row, he's led his team to the Fall Classic. Surprisingly to me and to some others, maybe even yourself, Dom, I don't think as much this year, but last year especially. But now this year with the experience, Dom, is that an added edge and factor to take into account for the Royals in this head-to-head matchup with the Mets, who are lacking in that postseason experience, in recent memory specifically?
I think to a certain extent it does. But both of these teams, as we see, are more than well-deserving. And let's not, completely underestimate, experience without even playing the postseason. A guy like, Curtis Granderson's been around the block. He's seen a few postseasons. So they have postseason experience. A guy like Bartolo Colon, 43 years of age. He's been around and, he's seen a lot. And, I think it'll help them, though, to help the Royals specifically because, they've been there before. They're going to take chances this year. Last year we saw what happened when Alex Gordon didn't tag up on that fly ball, and they could have tied the game, maybe even won the game going into that game-clinching game, and it was in the Game 7 there, and I think that'll help them as far as making certain decisions. They might be a little bit more riskier than they were last year. Last year they were more passive, being in the first time. I think that'll help. But I think both teams are battle-tested. Yeah,
now they know what it takes. They've been there last year. They had that bitter taste of defeat in their mouths from last year. So they wanted to be here. That was their goal. They achieved their goal of being here. Now it's about winning it, too, obviously, for the Royals. And I think being there last year serves as an asset to the Royals here. And the Mets lacking that, maybe they're lacking what they need then to win the World Series, even though it's not always that where the experience matters as much as people think it does. So with all that being said now, Dom, from you and from me, who do you got in this year's Fall Classic? The Mets or the Royals? And as we know, it would be the first time for both of these clubs winning in 3 decades, Dom. And that is something in itself, too.
I would have to say lean towards the Mets pitching their starters this year. And I think for one thing, I'm taking the Mets in 7. And I think one thing that will be an impact on this series is, who gets to their bullpen first, because that's the team that's probably going to lose. And, if the Mets are able to, they're a team that has hit the ball with more hard contact than the Royals. The Royals are more of a soft contact hitting team. They don't strike out a lot, but they get a lot of contact. I think if you look at the scouting reports, these teams are really evenly matched. Their strengths are relatively different, but I think it'll come down to who gets to the bullpen first. And what we've seen so far, we can't really trust these Royal starters, going deep into games. Ventura hasn't been able to do it. Cueto had the game against Houston at home where he went deep, but he's had some road struggles in the past, and I think it'll come down to that. And people, like last year, underestimated the Giants' bullpen. The Giants' bullpen last year had the best ERA in September of last year and going into the playoff in the National League. And then you have the Mets this year who have a very good ERA. They have a guy that Juris Familia, who's had a very good year as closer. They have guys who get the job done. And I believe that whatever hitting discrepancy there is, I think their power and just the inability of the Royal starters to really last long is going to hurt them.
You know what? Those bullpen arms, all those arms in both pens are of service, right, to the respective ball clubs. Dom, you were of service to me and a very good asset to have on today's edition of the podcast, the 14th episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco & Co. And Dom, thanks for all your insight today on the episode.
All right. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for the service from Dominic Chirco, my former sidekick and partner in crime here on Tigers Talk with Chirco & Co. Talked a lot about the new Mariners manager. How about that? Some interesting comments from Dom about hiring a first-year manager, whether or not you should do so, and how Scott Cervais, as I called him, it's actually Scott Service, as Dominic was calling him. I kind of like the Cervais. I would go by Cervais, honestly. Because it sounds like Cerveza almost, okay? It sounds like you're talking about beer almost. But it's just service. Doesn't look like it, I'll tell you that much. But he was talking about how he thinks Service and then DePoto, the new GM of the Mariners, will mesh there, and they can collaborate. They know each other from their experience with the Halos, and DePoto was there from 2011 until 2015. Service was there in that time frame as well. So that tells you they know each other, have that background with one another. That could be a good duo there in Seattle, even though Service is a guy with no prior coaching or managerial experience.
All right, Vito, I'm looking forward to getting your breakdown of the game tonight. Do you think that the starting pitching of the Mets will outduel Kansas City? Because Kansas City has the edge in the bullpen, but the Mets have some great starters led by Harvey, and it's going to be a great series. I think everyone's looking forward to it. Everyone's looking forward to a long series, one that I think could produce multiple memories that could be lasting.
Yeah, it should be exciting because you know what? You have the matchup of, as you were saying in the Periscope before the show, a great bullpen in the Royals, a great rotation, really 1 through 5 too, and the Mets only need the 4 starters though for the World Series here right now in a 7-game series. But I like how they can throw a hard 95 miles per hour or higher with their velocity, really as a collective unit with their rotation arms. And that's Matt Harvey going in Game 1. You have also, you have DeGrom, you have Syndergaard, all these guys that can throw 95 or above, and all these bats of the Royals 1 through 9 in their lineup that can hit 95 mile per hour pitches or above consistently at a high rate, efficiently at 300. They hit that good on those pitches thrown to them this past season, in the regular season of 2015. That tells you this should be very entertaining, very exciting from both ends, and for a variety of reasons. And other reasons include the fact that these teams haven't won in 30 years. That's a long time not to have won a World Series. Now, the Tigers have also experienced that and would be in the same boat now if they win going forward. It would be 30 years plus for them since they last won their World Series in 1984. It was 85 for the Royals, though, that year after, 86 for the Mets against the Bo Sox. These teams are both a little bit desperate, but the Mets are even more desperate and even more young, more unproven, with that being said, but I think still good enough without that experience to get it done, and that's why I'm picking the Mets. I didn't really I wasn't totally on the bandwagon to start the playoffs, but I thought the Mets were good enough to get to the World Series, but I had the Toronto Blue Jays for a long time until last week. I believe I switched my pick to the Mets last week. That was the first time I had done so.
Flip-flopper.
But I'm going to stick now with the Mets at this point to defeat the Royals, who I would love to see defeat the Royals, and in like 4 or 5 games. I just don't think that's going to happen because the Royals are so scrappy, and they make you work. They make all those good, effective pitchers get their pitch counts high up there. And because of that, the Royals will make it a series still. And they do have home field, which will help out an arm like Cueto, who's been miserable on the road this postseason.
Oh, you willing to do a little iced cappuccino bet to $2.50? I like Kansas City in 7.
Okay, so I'm going to say, my brother said Mets in 7. I'm going to say Mets get it done even earlier in 6. And that means that would be on the road. I mean, either way, that would be on the road in KC, remember, at Kauffman Stadium.
So are you
That's
willing,
hard to do.
So then you're willing to make a little bet with the doc that I got KC and you got the Mets?
$250 is cost efficient. Let's do it. I have that in my budget.
Very good. Okay, the doc has Kansas City. I like, I'm always of the opinion, being the psychologist, that the past will also, be a motivating factor. I know some of the players are different, but I do believe Kansas City has experience now in the World Series. Remember, the Mets are young. These pitchers are, still in their mid-20s. You got Harvey. You got, a lot of these young pitchers who haven't been in this situation before. Whereas Kansas City has been tested. They've been through the grind. And I do believe that in a Game 7, again, if there's a Game 7, Vito, where's it going to be? Kansas City. So that means that I don't think that they're going to lose twice. That would be, how devastating that would be to lose 2 Game 7 of the World Series back-to-back years. My goodness, that fan base doesn't deserve that. But I do think, though, if the starting pitchers of Kansas City can just get them 7 solid innings, some key hits, then that bullpen can take over. And, your brother said it, that the starters are going to really dictate who's going to be dominant in this series. And I do think, though, in the end, when you really break it down, Kansas City's going to have the slight edge. So I'm taking Kansas City in a 7-game series to win it all.
It would be of service to the Mets to score early and often because they don't want to have to go through the Royals bullpen. When the Royals have a lead, they don't blow those leads. Remember that. They really haven't.
What's gotten into Daniel Murphy? I mean, a guy who hasn't hit 14 home runs.
7 postseason home runs, right?
Consecutively.
How about that? That's big regardless, but even bigger because he's doing it in Queens for the Mets. And he'll get paid handsomely. He's a guy that really hasn't ever been this great, has never been a superstar. He's playing like a superstar talent. He's balling out, as I would say, in the NFL or in basketball. But in baseball, he's just hitting the pitches he has to and hitting them a long way out of the ballpark more often than not. Will he keep it up? Because you know what? If he doesn't, Cespedes, Ennis Cespedes, the big yo man, has to step it up big time at the plate with the power production. Remember, he hit 0 home runs in the NLCS and that 4-game sweep of the Cubs. He has to hit 1 or 2 and produce more than 3 ribbies, as I believe it was against the Cubs, as well in that NLCS. And that was good for, really bad enough for, with all those numbers accounted for, that produced a below 700 on-base plus slugging percentage for Cespedes, who will still get paid as much as he really wants to in the offseason. He can probably just sign whatever he wants on a blank check and get that amount. But he still has to pick it up for the Mets to win it all, though, this fall, in my opinion. And that's the question now for you. Murphy has done it so far. But if he doesn't kind of live up to the bill that he's already set for himself now because of his production in the NLCS, in the NLDS as well, then Cespedes, it falls almost entirely on him at least to get it done with the power production specifically. Will he do that, though, in the World Series against the Royals, in your opinion, Doc?
Well,
he hit 0 home runs in the NLCS. Can he hit 1 or 2 and produce enough to allow the Mets to win this series? Because we know that the Mets aren't a great offensive attack and weren't before July, before midseason this year, before they made those moves for Uribe, for Kelly Johnson, for Cespedes. So if they get into that funk where they can't hit again, the Royals might win this series and win it very easily.
Well, that's the marquee question. Yoenis Cespedes is a guy that's streaky. So just look for the early games and look for how his at-bats look. I mean, if, obviously the pitching is going to be, to try to, kind of move the ball a little bit off the plate, mix and match speeds, and try to have him off balance. But if you throw him a fastball anywhere near the hitting zone, look out. You're playing with fire, as they would say, because Cespedes can mash, and he's got the ability. Cespedes is a guy that's streaky, and we all know that being here in Detroit, in that, and watching him at Oakland, is that he's a guy that if he just gets a couple base hits, he gets in that hitting groove, look out. It could be dangerous. But I do think that the Royals already know what to do with him because, remember, played earlier this year with the Tigers. So they know the pitchers on KC have faced him this year. And I do think they'll have a significant game plan ready for him waiting in the World Series. And I do think that KC has the edge.
But the good thing is that these batters, Cespedes included, knows the Game 1 starter for the Royals in Edinson Volquez because of his experience pitching in the NL. So with that being said, Cespedes and the club's postseason hero, Daniel Murphy, have all hit .333 or above against Volquez, the Game 1 starter of the Royals. And actually, the Mets have 6 batters in total, boasting an average of .333 or above, Doc, against Volquez, the right-hander for the Royals, going in Game 1 at Kauffman Stadium. I kind of like the Mets' odds winning Game 1 because of that factor. Now, what do you think when taking that into account, the experience factor of the Mets' bats against Volquez? Is that a big-time advantage for the Metropolitans in Game 1?
I think so. I agree with you. I do agree that, here's the exciting part about, early on in baseball, because right now the first game is going to be a feel-out process. You're going to see early on what the pitching, scouting reports are going to be. You're going to see how it's executed. But in the end, in most baseball series, it's going to be who makes the adjustments. The first time around in an order, the pitcher has an advantage. The second time around, again, the pitcher tends to have some advantages. But that third time around, do the hitters start to make those advantages? Do they start to make those adjustments? And are they able to, decipher what pitch is coming? And it's really tough at times because starting pitchers can, do have an advantage nowadays. I do believe that good starting pitching will always outdo good hitting. So it's going to be who makes the better adjustments. I like KC in Game 1.
But remember, Rios only has experience against the Game 1 starter for the Metropolitans and Matt Harvey, the Dark Knight of Queens. With that being said, they're lacking big-time experience against Harvey. Does that play in the favor of the Mets once again, with Harvey going on the mound without a lot of guys that know him and his stuff?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that, Doc?
What do you think?
Oh, really? Going to put it on me now? Well, I think it's a big-time advantage for the Mets. I think it is, too, them going up against Edinson Volquez and them knowing what he's bringing, what his arsenal of pitches is. And the Royals don't know what the arsenal of pitches is exactly for Harvey. Now, they've studied up. They've watched the game film. They know him and what he brings because he's a top-notch pitcher and all the films out there about him that you can study. But the thing is, they haven't faced him, though, and that's a different story. So with that aspect being brought up, I think the Royals are lacking something going into Game 1 of this series, and the Mets have the big-time advantage knowing Edinson Volquez and what he brings every fifth day as a starter.
Okay, then.
So I'm saying Game 1, too. In Game 1, Mets can upset It would be an upset of sorts because it's on the road there in KC. With that being said, yes, I believe they pull it off and win game 1.
Okay.
And win the series.
I believe that Ned Yost and that staff will have the pitchers ready and have a good scouting report ready to tackle the Mets because, obviously at this point in time in the year, everything's on film. They'll have a very decent scouting report, and it's going to be up to Volquez to execute those pitches. Obviously, if he makes mistakes, the Mets are going to capitalize. And in these big games, you never know how the pressure might, get to them. But I think that the home crowd will be into it, and that can help overcome the nerves in game 1. So I really believe I think going into New York, it's going to be a split, 1-1. Game 1 to Kansas City, game 2 for the Mets.
Okay, I could see that happening. I see a split at least happening.
You believe that?
I believe the Mets. I could see in 6-2, Doc.
Okay, I say Kansas City in 7. I like the fact that, like I said, I like the experience. I like the bullpen. I just think that home field advantage is very important. In that deciding game 7, I'm hoping that it's going to be a classic game. I'm just hoping I'm going to tune in. Now, I did tune in a little bit to the Mets series versus the Cubs. I did tune in a little bit to the AL series, but mostly I focused on the NL, but I'm excited. I'm going to watch every pitch of the World Series. I'm super excited.
And the good thing now for the Royals, too, is that they have their ace-caliber arm in Johnny Cueto on the mound in Game 2 at home, where he's been a lot better. Remember, he won that Game 5 of the ALDS round against the Astros at Kauffman Stadium. Now he's here in Game 2 at home. He would be lined up to pitch in Game 6 at home as well, and maybe win that series-deciding, series-clinching game there in Game 6.
I'm going to enjoy my ice cap from you because you're going to lose.
I hope you're losing. I hope you go down, Doc. I really do.
It was a fun podcast. Your brother Dom did great. I think that it's going to be a fun series, and I think next week's podcast will be right in the middle, right in the heart of the series, and we'll get a chance to break it down and talk about some key plays and some more news and notes, hopefully, from the Tigers.
You know what, really quick, our dark horses, our MVP favorite, not even a dark horse, but I'm going to name one as my MVP caliber player that, could rise up and do something this series. I'm going to say a guy like Juan Uribe could come out of nowhere. He's playing for the first time in this year's postseason. He's hit before for the Giants in the postseason, in 2005 for the World Series champion White Sox. What if he comes to form in this year's World Series and hits a few, maybe home runs, or gets a few quality hits to start a rally or to drive in a few guys? If he becomes that run producer in this series, that's another added bat for the Mets and another added reason why I believe they'll get it done and get it done in 6 games, even though they'll be on the road in Game 6 and possibly and most likely against Johnny Cueto and the Royals there in Game 6. So how about you for an MVP favorite or maybe even a dark horse guy, as I brought up in Juan Uribe for the Mets?
Nope, I'm going with, just because week in, week out, you've hated on Johnny Cueto, and you've said subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, I hate Johnny Cueto. Basically, you've started and are probably behind the IHateJohnnyCueto.com website.
But, I should be by now, right? I have trolled him so much to this point.
So wouldn't it be great? They win the World Series, and he's the MVP. So that's my guy, just to spite you, Vito.
Well, you know what? If he does that, the Tigers better get out there and sign him. But his price tag might astronomically rise, too, and put him out of the ballpark for the Tigers this offseason when they look to add some rotation arms. But I favor the Mets with their rotation, that young starting 4. They all can bring the heat, and their bullpen's good enough. The lineup can be good enough. With Uribe coming back with Cespedes, I think he'll be better in this series. And that's why my pick was what it was, Mets in 6. And Doc, yours once again is Royals in 7. And we'll see who gets that bet, has that bet come to fruition for them, right? That $2.50 bet. And it's for Tim Hortons, what, for coffee, you're saying?
Medium ice cap. For me, whatever you want from there. If you want $2.50, $3, I'll get you a drink or something.
I'll decide what it is then. Yep. Doc, with that, my man, thank you very much for all your time. And to Dominic Chirco, my bro, for calling in as well for a segment today on the 14th episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco & Co. We'll talk to you once again next Wednesday on Tigers Talk with Chirco & Co. Bye-bye.